Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Sunday Career Success. My name is Bill, the company's expert, and today we're going to be talking about what you should do in a job interview. This has been something that we've been talking about for a while on my main channel, the company's expert. But today I'm going to give a sort of overview, if talking going from the very general type stuff that we need to do all the way down to a bit more specific things. And once again, I would encourage you to ask questions. This is a live chat, so hopefully you can see the live chat where you can type in your questions as we go, and we will go from there. I'm just going to move my notes over to the other side. There we go. Because I'm using a very ancient setup here. My computer is actually 10 years old, but it's holding itself together very well. Okay, so what to do in a job interview. Now, we have covered a lot of the more common job interview questions, okay, in separate videos. I'm going to give an overview of them here. That would probably be a good place to start. So everybody hopefully knows that there's a few standard questions that you're going to be asked, okay? You can pretty much predict these. There's between 5 and 10 of them. Things like, tell me about yourself. You know, what do you say for that? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why should I hire you? That's a big one. Why did you leave your last job? What are your salary expectations? What's your greatest weakness? How do you handle stress? Things like this. These are pretty standard questions, so obviously you're going to want to do some preparation before and talk about those. Okay, but as a lot of people know, they're not just going to fire standard questions at you. What's a very common thing is that they're going to ask you behavioral-based questions. And behavioral-based questions, for those of us that have heard of these, they're actually very common. In the last 20 years, they've really ramped up on these. And these are the questions that start with, tell me about a time that you did something, right? Those type of questions where the answer is going to be a story from your past. Okay, so that's something that we need to be able to handle. And we do this by preparing several standard stories before we do the job interview. It's a matter of thinking about your past and thinking about certain stories and experiences that demonstrate different things. And the way that why we say that you should do preparation for this is because, it's very hard to think up something original that maybe happened years ago on the spot when you've got a bunch of strangers staring at you and the pressure's on. So for that reason, it really helps doing preparation and coming up with usually between 5 and 10 stories that demonstrate different things. Okay, so I've talked about that a little bit on my main channel, The Company's Expert, but that is something that I'm going to be doing a video on in the near future. The bottom line is that there's certain things that they ask about. Okay, there's standard questions that they will want to see. They want to see a principle demonstrated. Okay, so like, for example, they want to see that you can work under pressure. And So they will ask you a question where you have to answer with an experience from your past where it demonstrates that you worked under pressure and you did a great job. Okay. So for that reason, if you know that there's a good chance you're going to be asked something along those lines, if you go into the interview having prepared a story where you've thought about this, to yourself without the pressure being on, without strangers staring at you, you've thought about it. You thought, okay, well, this would be a great story for me to tell. This thing that I did 3 years ago, because that's probably the best example of that. And you rehearse it a couple of times, so you refresh the details. And then when you go to the interview and they ask you that question, it's fresh in your mind, right? So that's the key for answering behavioral-based questions. Preparation, right? What's good is to come in there with between 5 and 10 stories, like I said, from your past that demonstrates different things. And then probably, no matter what question they throw at you, excuse me, you're going to be able to pull out a story, one of those 5 to 10 stories that will fit what they're looking for. And you have those on the tip of your mind. So it works really well. So those are behavioral-based questions. And we're going to be covering other things. Now, those are kind of standard things that you can very easily get answers to, how to answer this question, how to prepare for behavioral-based questions. That's kind of pretty standard, and a lot of people look that up on the internet, and there's many, many sources that will give you ideas for how you can answer those questions. And interestingly enough, you get a variety of different answers for how to answer those questions. And that can partly be explained by the fact that, we're really generalizing here when we say how to answer this question. In reality, as a lot of people know, you're going to get different types of people asking you these questions in different situations. You could be in different industries. You could be at different levels, like a worker level, entry level, or an executive. They're going to have different expectations of what they want to hear. And then it also varies by the culture of the environment and the preferences of the individuals that are asking these questions. So there's going to be a lot of variables there. So that partly explains why there's quite a few varying answers for how to answer these questions. Now, it's interesting because my approach and what I try and talk about on my channel is I try and talk a mix of how you would answer these questions at an entry level, but I also talk a lot, I'm coming from the perspective of being like middle manager or an executive manager too, because I find that there's not a lot of sources for that type of hiring information freely available online. So I'm coming at this more from a middle manager or an executive level. But I have found that a lot of those principles, not all of them, but a lot of them carry down to worker level. So if you gave an answer more along the lines of what you would say in an executive interview, if you gave that at a worker level, a lot of times that's a good answer. So for that reason, that's how I approach this, and that's how I'm framing my recommendations for everybody. Once again, I would like to encourage people to participate in the chat. I have the chat working so I can see everyone's questions. And I want to give a shout out to all the people in my Facebook group. I now have about 220 people in my Facebook group called Get Hired, the Company's Expert. So I encourage you to check that out. There's a link in the description if you want to exchange with like-minded people that are learning this stuff. Excellent. Okay, so let's step back for a second. And I have talked extensively about how to answer job interview questions, okay? And today I wanted to get into some of the other elements. So there's a few other elements, and I'll just start going through these. The most obvious question is how to dress, right? How to dress for the interview. It's interesting. The conventional wisdom is that for positions of all levels, right? Whether you're a worker or a mid-level employee or an executive, chances are a job interview is going to be among the most formal situations that your hiring manager, your boss, will see you in. So if ever they're going to see you dress up, it's for your job interview. So in a way, you could interpret this as saying, well, they want to see how you prepare for something formal. And so you're going to be as dressed up as you ever will be in the job interview. It's unlikely that you would go to a job interview dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, but then in order to do your job, you would need to dress up in a suit and tie. That situation is not very common. Usually it's the opposite. You would dress up in a suit and tie for your job interview, and then your job may require that dress code or lower, jeans and a t-shirt. So the job interview is going to be a display of your most formal. So you could look at this question from that approach. Okay. Now, what really helps is if you are going for an interview, and obviously the company, the organization that you're going to be interviewing with, a great thing to do is to get on the internet, get on Google or Bing or whatever search engine of your choice, and search that company and do an image search for that company in your hometown. Okay, so I'm in Winnipeg, Canada. So I would, if I'm searching for a company, say, John's Accounting, what I would do is I'd go to Google, I'd go to images, and I'd say John's Accounting Winnipeg, and do an image search and see what pictures pop up. And presumably, a lot of the image results will be the company itself, and it'll be employees of the company, and you'll be able to get a sense of their dress code. Okay. Now, for example, if you're going for an interview for a tech company, maybe you're an engineer or software developer or something, but it's a tech company that's a little bit fashion conscious. It's not, it's sort of like cutting edge, glossy, shiny tech company, right? Now you may be conflicted because, do you dress like an engineer or do you dress like a fashion person, right? What exactly are their expectations? So you can get a feel for that by doing an image search. Now, presumably a lot of the image results will be from the company's own website. So you may be able to see this from the company's website, but a lot of times you can't. They don't necessarily show pictures of their employees in their work habitat. So that's why doing a general image search is usually the way to go here. Now, what I've found personally in recent years is that although I love Google for like a web search, like most people, their image searching is really not that great. They've made some changes to it recently. So don't laugh, but I use Bing for image searches. And I find that it's a lot better quality image search if you go to bing.com, bing.com. Not necessarily recommending that website across the board, but I do find that their image search has some advantages to it. So you can do that. Now, what you should do is if you get a general idea of what employees from that company dress like, what you want to do is you want to try and show up to your job interview looking like one of those people. You look like you belong there. When you walk through the door, you look like the candidate, right? The person they're going to select. All you have to do is not talk yourself out of that, right? That's a much better situation than walking through the door and already looking like someone who doesn't belong there. And then you have to try and change their minds by talking yourself into it. That's a much harder battle. That's a more uphill struggle. So that's what I want to say about how to dress. Think on the formal side and then do, maybe 3 minutes worth of research, if that, to get an idea of what these people look like. Is it a place where they're all dressed up in suit and ties? Or is it a place where they're all in black turtlenecks? Or is it a place where they're all in like sort of the bowling shirt, kind of technician type shirt? Even the CEO. So knowing that would be very good to frame what you decide to wear and how you decide to groom your appearance for the interview. Now, one thing I want to say about job interviews, and this is looking at it from a very bird's eye level view here, and that is that, you've got to relax at a job interview. I know that's totally easier said than done, but think of it this way. You're going to the interview and you're going to see if what you have is what they just happen to be looking for. That's the attitude I think most people should take. Obviously, you want to try and do your best. Obviously, you do. But you've got to realize that this is a numbers game, okay? And usually, they have essentially a hidden agenda of what they're looking for. And if you meet it, you meet it. It's great. If you don't meet it, there's not much you can do about that. And it isn't a reflection of you as a person. It just means that you don't happen to really be what they have in mind. It's not a reflection on you. It's a reflection on them. And there are a lot of companies that are going for very specific things. They have some very strange corporate cultures, and they have strange ideas in their head about what types of employees they're looking for. This is the reality. And, you know, if you happen to fit that, great. If you don't sweat it, because you are a valuable, talented, employable person. You just need to find the right fit. That's the nature of employment. It's a very serendipitous process, and it's a numbers game. The more interviews you do and the more jobs you apply for, the higher your chances of getting hired. I know on the face of it, that sounds obvious, but when you think about it, it's really not obvious. A lot of people don't believe in quantity. They believe in a very specific quality approach, and that does make sense in a lot of areas, but this process is more akin to a sales process than an engineering process. And that's what a lot of people don't understand, especially people that don't work in sales. I didn't come up through sales, but I know that that's the nature of this process. You just happen to be having to have what they're looking for. Okay. And if you don't sweat it. They're looking for weird things. Okay. You just got to do more of them. So that's the attitude you should have. You're going there to see if they just happen to be looking for the type of person you are. Okay. A lot of people don't have that. A lot of people think the opposite. They think, no, I must bend and twist and tailor myself into what they want. Now, I get the sentiment. You want to do your best, right? But if they happen to be looking for someone who will sell their soul to the company, and you're not a slave, you know, you don't think that way about employment, you know, and they don't select you, you may have dodged a bullet. So don't sweat it. Okay. You're a very valuable person. You're a very employable person. It's just a matter of going through this process until you find the right fit. And the challenge is in opening up as many leads as you possibly can that look promising. Okay, so remember that. The evidence that backs this up, in case you're not coming with me on this, is you have jobs in the posted job market, you have jobs in the hidden job market. Okay, and most people who have gotten a few jobs, they know that if you are interviewing for a job on the hidden job market, it's a completely different vibe to the interview. They tend to believe you more when you say things. They tend to have a much more favorable attitude towards considering you than if you've applied for a job that's been posted publicly and you don't have any networking type connections in the company, they don't know you, and you go in for a formal job interview. It tends to be almost like an interrogation where they don't believe anything you say and they want you to back up everything you say. And they're really, even up to the point where some companies do stress interviews, you know, where they will intentionally hit you with a barrage of questions that it's meant to make you uncomfortable. It's meant to make you frustrated. It's meant to stress you out. And they do this to treat you like a guinea pig so they can see how you behave under these conditions, right? It's a very hostile type situation. So those of us who have done this kind of thing for a few years, I mean, you know, those are like night and day. Posted job interviews, like where you're applying for a job, and jobs on the hidden job market where you've been asking around through networking, say, hey, I'm here, I've got this. That if you're looking for this, let me know. And people contact you. Tends to be a whole other thing. Okay? You just happen to have what they happen to be looking for. Okay? So don't get stressed out about it either. Okay? Job hunting is, as everybody knows, is usually a very stressful type activity. And because people think if they don't get selected, then there must be something wrong with them. And there isn't. Okay? There isn't. Now, okay. So when you go into a job interview, probably one of the most important things, the most important thing that I would say that people have to have, candidates have to have, is to be likable. Okay? You have to be likable. Because the reality is that for most jobs, there are more than one candidate. There are several candidates that fit the technical qualifications. They meet the requirements of the job. Okay, so, the first thing that recruiters do when you're interviewing with recruiters, everyone knows what recruiters are, right? Recruiters are HR people that they know HR, but they don't know the specific, a sector or details of the actual job. If they could be hiring for an engineering job, but the recruiters are not engineers. They might not know anything about engineering, but they're hiring for an engineering job. So they know HR. That's a recruiter. Hiring manager is the opposite. Hiring manager is not a person from HR. They're going to be the boss of the person that's hired. Okay, so they probably will be an engineer. They will be a professional engineer, a chief engineer. They will be the head of engineering, something like that. Okay, so two different types of people, recruiters and hiring managers. Now, the number one thing you need to be is likable, because after the recruiters have checked that you meet all the technical requirements for the position, okay, they're usually left with more than one candidate. Usually you have a short list of between 5 and 10 candidates that meet all the technical requirements. Okay? Now, the question is, how do you choose between those 5 and 10 candidates, right? You have to come up with another criteria that's going to tell you conclusively what type of person you should select. And a lot of that is to do with soft skills. And a big part of that is to be likable. So think about it the other way. Think about if you were a hiring manager and you went to a series of job interviews with a recruiter and you pared down the 20 or so candidates to say 5, okay? And any of these 5 have the technical skills, okay? They fit the bill. But now you have to go down from 5 to 1. And depending on the size of the company, there may be formal procedures for this, or it could be totally a judgment call on the part of the hiring manager. Okay, if you're in a mid-sized company or smaller company, the hiring manager will just say, well, I choose this person. I like them the best. Just as simple as that. Now, if it's a larger organization, they might have more formal HR policies that govern this kind of decision. Okay. But at the end of the day, the battle over who gets the job is not about technical requirements, because all the candidates have the technical requirements. You have to go beyond that. Okay. So that's why I say the number one most important thing in the job interview is to be likable. Now, let's get into that. How can you be likable? That's a great question. And a lot of extroverts might have a good feel for this one. You know what to do. A lot of introverts might not. Like, how do you meet a stranger or meet a couple of strangers and then under this high stress, high pressure situation, artificial situation, you get them to like you? A lot of introverted type people, myself being one of them, a lot of those type of people the answer might not be obvious. Well, there's a few things you can do, okay, to be sort of instantly likable, okay? And I know this is going to sound this is going to sound so basic, but it's true. Number one, you got to smile. Okay. If you go into the job interview and everyone you talk to, you look like this, you're just nervous and kind of, on edge, right? That might not be the great thing. Now you might feel like that. Okay. You might feel like that in the job interview. It's not exactly, a super fun thing, but you got to basically show up and smile. Say, hey, how's it going? It's good to be here. Thank you very much for having me. And then, just be pleasant and look pleasant, look approachable, be polite, act professionally. Okay. You got to be polite. You got to be insanely polite. Okay. Somebody says something. Thank you. Great job. Would I please be able to do this? Something like that. Just be likable like that. Don't be too gruff. And I've said this before, there's something in management, in management specifically for managers, if you're trying to get a job as a manager, where I don't know if you want to call it a movement or an attitude or an approach, but there's a lot of people that think that, you have to be aggressive to be taken seriously. And there's a lot of corporate cultures in certain industries and in certain companies that they foster this. They have this idea that, if I'm in charge, I'm not going to be the nicest guy. I'm going to be the most unapproachable guy, or the most unapproachable person. Really aggressive, looking like unapproachable, and then, make a lot of really cutting remarks that don't make people feel good. And their excuse is, I'm telling it like it is. And yes, that's true. That does make sense. However, long term, it doesn't work. Long term, either you end up surrounded by psychopaths or the good people leave. It's just as simple as that. So, now, if you happen to be interviewing at an organization like that, I think you can make the best judgment of what to do there. I don't know if I want to recommend being like that. I don't think that's the way to go. That might give you some short-term gain in an organization like that, but I think long-term, it's not that I think long-term. We've shown long-term that it doesn't really work. There's been a lot of management science, studies and things like that have shown that. So when you go to the job interview, try and be likable. How do you be likable? Smile, be polite, be pleasant. Okay. Try not to be wound up. And I know that that's hard, but think of it like this. Okay. The result of the interview, the result of the selection process, whether you get selected or not, is much more dependent on the company and the interviewers than it is on you. They will hire the person that they're looking for. And if they're looking for something that is kind of weird and you just don't happen to be that, that's more a reflection on them than it is on you. So try and be likable as you can. Okay. It's down to your soft skills. Okay. Your soft skills are basically, and this is very important for the hiring manager. Recruiters care less about this. The recruiters care about, do you meet the technical requirements for the job? That's what recruiters care about. Hiring managers, on the other hand, if you are hired, they have to work with you. Okay. Now, if you were a hiring manager and you were interviewing 5 people that all could do the job, and one of them you just do not click with, but another person you get along really well, when you interview that candidate, you want to extend the interview. You want to stay in the room with them longer than you need to, because you enjoy talking to them. Now, if you were the hiring manager, who would you choose? You'd probably choose the person that you click with, you get along with, that nobody gets offended talking to each other. People understand each other. That's kind of what a lot of those decisions, I regret to say, they're based on. So that's how important this is. If I can impress one thing on you, it'll be that. Okay, be likable. Now, body language is another big area of this. Okay, and this is another thing that you can look up on Google, your YouTube, or a place of your choice. You can read it in books. I'm not an absolute expert on body language, but I do know the basics, and a lot of people should know the basics. Generally speaking, just let's talk about hands. With your hands, palms up is a very open, positive kind of gesture or position that you're in. Posture. I'm not sure what you call it. Palms down tends to be a bit more forceful. So like when you're pointing at someone like this, that tends to be very forceful type motion. But when you're doing, it's hard with the camera right here, but if you're doing this, palms up, tends to be a much more positive, polite, non-aggressive gesture or posture. Okay. If you're sitting in your chair and you're all kind of clamped up like this, obviously that's bad. You want to be kind of open, kind of sort of arms apart, legs apart a little bit, that kind of thing. You don't want to be all hunched over. You want to be kind of in a normal posture. So I would encourage you to look up the basics of body language. Okay, this is a big and complicated topic, but the basics are pretty simple to master. If you find this interesting, I would recommend that you look it up. Just take 5 minutes of your time and read up on that. Eye contact is another part of it. There are a lot of people that do not wish to make eye contact with the person who's talking to them if they feel nervous or stressed. And that is a thing. I myself was like that when I was very young. But the reality is eye contact, at least in Western cultures, is appropriate and it's polite and it's good. Now, in some cultures in the world, it's a sign of respect to not make eye contact. So that may vary by where you are in the world, but in Europe, in North America, South America, a lot of other places, eye contact is good. It doesn't matter if you're meeting the CEO, and you're interviewing for an entry-level job, your eye contact is still appropriate and well regarded. Okay. Now, if you kind of have the intense kind of eyes, that might be going a bit too far, and if you never leave there, you never avert your eyes or blink or something, that could be a problem. But regular eye contact for most of the time that you're talking is a good thing. Okay. You shouldn't avert it. So these are things that if you've never thought of them before, you might want to do a little bit of independent research on these and maybe practice them, do a few practice interviews with other people, even if it's the members of your family. Usually members of your family are not the first people you would go to practice, but if that's all you got, it's better than nothing. Okay. Somebody says in the chat, and never mumble. Yeah, that's true. Speak clearly. Now, it's not a shouting contest, but you want to be clear. Okay, that's part of communication skills and people skills. So we talked about, okay, who are you interviewing with? So I just want to make sure everybody knows, okay, there's two people you could be interviewing with, a recruiter and a hiring manager. And the way you give them what they want is going to be radically different. Okay, the recruiter cares about requirements. The hiring manager cares about whether they like you. Okay, two big things. So you're going to want to obviously give all of this. And at the end of the day, a lot of times the hiring manager is the one that makes the final decision. So that's the person you really got to try and have a rapport with, is the hiring manager. Now, there's one other super important thing. And if there's a takeaway from today, as far as I'm concerned, from this live chat, number one, it would be likable. And number two would be the following. Okay. The other thing that you need to do in the interview that goes beyond the technical requirements is to communicate that you want the job. Now, I know that gets repeated like a cliche, but this is what I mean. You want to communicate that you specifically want this job. You're not looking for any job. You're wanting this job. That's what you have to communicate. It's very important. Okay? I know this from being a hiring manager and from hiring people, and I know how important that is. If you try and step into the shoes of a hiring manager, okay, Hiring manager usually is some form of manager or supervisor. They supervise a group of employees, and they are responsible for that group of employees. They have been given a task, and in order to complete that task, they are going to need to lead a team of people that will help them achieve that goal or that accomplish that task. And so you want people on your team that more than just have technical qualifications. You want people that want to help you achieve that goal. Okay? That's what you're looking for. Okay? Now let me give you an example to illustrate this. If you interview a candidate and the candidate has the technical qualifications, okay, so they've got all the education and the experience that you think that position needs. Okay, so they have that. But when you talk to these people, this candidate, you get the impression that, they're just in it for the money. They don't care about this company. They don't care about this type of work. They don't care about accomplishing these types of goals. They just want the money. That's the only thing that they care about. Okay, now imagine if you were hiring and this was the candidate that you were talking to. Would you hire that person? And the answer is no. Okay, the vast majority of people will not hire that person. Yes, they got the technical qualifications. Yes, they could do it theoretically. But as we all know, people don't work at something that they don't enjoy. This is a fact of human nature. It's well known in HR circles. People don't do things that they don't enjoy. Not for the long term. You could maybe get them to do it. You could force them to do it in the short term. It may not work out great, but it might work out in the short term. But long term, you can't force people to do something that they just dislike doing. Okay, it's just that simple. The more they enjoy something, the more engaged they will be, the more enthusiastic they will be, the more work they'll put in, the more effort they'll exert, the more passionate they'll be about doing the job well. Okay, so what you're looking for is a candidate that really, really wants this job specifically. Okay, that's what you're looking for. So you have to communicate this to the people that are interviewing you, whether it's recruiters, hiring managers, or anyone else, observers, during the interview. You have to communicate this by not necessarily stating it explicitly. You could state it explicitly. You could say, look, I want this job. And I've done that before. When I got a job, I was being interviewed by a CEO of a company about 5 years ago for something and about some work I might do with them. And they gave me a proposal. They said, this is the job. And they flew me in from another city to go and talk to them. I was in a restaurant and I was meeting with the CEO. And they said, look, this is the job. This is what I need you to do. What do you think? And I remember very clearly, I said, okay, I'm going to tell you something right now, and I need you to listen. Are you listening? And they said, yeah, I'm listening. I said, okay, I want this job. Okay, I'm very passionate about doing this. I think this is awesome. Okay, and I think I could do a great job. So I did get that job. So you can state this explicitly. You can do it. But I think what people are looking for is they want that demonstrated indirectly. I think that goes a lot further. Okay, so if you act like this is something you really want to do, and when you give answers to the behavioral based questions, where you have to tell a story about your past and it demonstrates certain things about you, if those stories and the things it demonstrates kind of point to the fact that you're looking for this type of job and you're good at this type of job, that really carries a lot of weight. Okay, so number one takeaway is be pleasant, be likable. Number two is communicate that you really actually do want this job specifically, because that goes a long way. And usually that can even overcome some deficiencies in the technical requirements. So maybe another candidate has more experience, but you want this job more. You're more suited to it. This makes more sense for you to be in the job than them. So that's a big one too. Okay, so make sure you communicate that. You can state it explicitly, and you can back it up indirectly as you're going through the interview and answering questions. Give that impression. Okay. For example, if somebody says, would you relocate for this job? And you could say, oh yeah. Well, for this job, oh yes, definitely. Something like that. Just making this up as I go, but like something like that. It indirectly kind of points to like, okay, you specifically want this job. So, so those are, I think, the two most important things of all. As I said, now beyond this, don't worry too much about job interviews. The goal, the way to approach a job search, in my opinion and in my experience, is to basically look at getting leads. It's essentially the sales process. You get leads, you do like a presentation, which is your interview, and then you do a follow-up. Okay, that's kind of the sales process. A job interview mirrors that process. Try and get a lot of leads, get a lot of interviews. Okay, and then you go down to the interview. Instead of being super nervous and trying to second guess everything and try and guess what they're looking for, and you're trying to wear a mask of being that person. Go down, be likable, be pleasant, and really convey that you want this job specifically. And if they hire you, great. It's probably a good match. If they don't hire you, don't sweat it. Okay, chances are, each interview you go to, you have a much higher chance of not getting the job than you do of getting the job. And it says more about them than it does about you. You're still employable, you're still talented. And you can't control what they happen to be looking for. There could be, and I speak from experience being on the other side of this, they could have all kinds of weird agenda that they need to conform to select a candidate. And as I've said before in this channel, one of the biggest ones that I use as an example of this was somebody said, I need someone in my department and they need all these skills, but I refuse to hire somebody who's a fan of this sports team. And that's true. So, you think you're the perfect candidate, you really want the job, blah, blah, blah. And then they ask you about like, oh, what did you think of the game the other day? And you're like, oh, you kind of state whatever answer. And it's like, oh, you just lost the job. You have no way of predicting these things, so don't worry too much about it. Okay, so that's kind of what I wanted to go over today. I think that's a good overview. For all people that are listening to this, this is my secondary channel called The Company's Expert Live. I'm still sort of getting my chops down doing live streaming and seeing what I can do with this channel. My main channel is The Company's Expert. I got far more activity and far more subscribers on that channel. So check it out, subscribe. I have a lot of videos about how to get a job and just various other business topics. So subscribe. Thank you for your attention. I think you guys are all awesome and wonderful. And yes, I am talking about you. Have yourselves a great weekend, and I will see you on the next one. This is a weekly show, so tune in next Sunday for Sunday Career Success. Thank you very much, and have a great day.